Well, joining us now in the studio is Katie Harrison from the charity organisation Tearfund. Katie, thank you so much for joining us. Now, you were quite recently in some of the refugee camps in Lebanon. From what you're hearing from your colleagues there, are you hearing stories of people leaving? There just generally being more movement because of this fear of impending Western strikes?
There's a lot of movement and has been consistently for many months. People leave the refugee camps, particularly the big ones in Jordan or the small makeshift settlements in places like Lebanon, because if you're living under canvas, life is very, very difficult, especially if it rains and the tents flood, it's cold at night, it's not a proper roof over your head. So even though the camps are well organised, the tents are in rows of streets, it's like a city of tents. And there are hospitals and schools and there are good services within the camps, but there are more and more people arriving all the time, so they become very crowded. So what we're finding is many people will leave the camps and they'll go maybe to a neighbouring town. They might try and rent an apartment with 2 or 3 other families. Then that becomes very, very crowded. People run out of money very quickly. And then they're trying to rebuild their lives for themselves. So the schools are full now in the neighbouring countries. So it's difficult to get a child into school. The doctors' lists are full. So if you've got a sick or disabled child, as many of these families do have, it's very difficult to get the help that you need.
And you were mentioning that people just keep on coming. The violence in Syria has been going on for years. So how are the needs different for people that are arriving now to the refugee camps?
We've seen a big increase in the last few weeks of people leaving Syria and going into neighbouring countries, Lebanon and Jordan in particular, but as we know from the last week or so, particularly into Iraq. And so what we're finding is many of the people who are leaving Syria now have tried very, very, very hard to stay, because this has been going on for 2.5 years, as we know. So they've had good reasons to stay, often because they're caring for elderly relatives, perhaps their child is disabled or they have many people to take care of in their family. And so they had thought, well, we've got to stay because it's just going to be too much like hard work to leave. We can't leave, we're too vulnerable. So these people have much higher needs than those perhaps that left a year or 2 years ago, and they need more help from people like us.
And just remind us what some of the needs, what some of the things that you've seen have been.
Well, people who are working for Tearfund in those countries are hearing from people, I met people too, who are travelling while pregnant and then need a lot of help at the time they give birth. I met one woman...
Well, there was that baby that was born on the boat on the way to Sicily.
Exactly, we just heard that story. I met one woman who had fled while in labour, just as that family had, and she had been having contractions all the way through the journey. She was only 18, it was her first baby, she was very, very, very scared. I met one family living on a roof in a disused building in the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon, and I was chatting to the mum and she wanted to show me something, so she took me into this cold, dark room with blankets on the floor, and she bent down to this pile of blankets and she just picked up this bundle and put it into my arms. And it was this precious 2-day-old baby girl who'd been born there in the middle of nowhere with no medical help. So people have severe health needs. People often have extreme trauma. So the children that I met, the parents would tell me these children are having nightmares, they're sleepwalking, they're very, very traumatised.
Well, good luck with all the hard work
that
you're putting in with the refugees. Katie Harrison from the charity Tearfund.